Hi everyone, and a massive welcome to the second of the Christmas holiday specials here on InfoSec Live of the CISO Experience, where this week we're getting to engage with and learn from 5 of our industry's leaders in a live setting with open and honest conversations. And today is a very special event indeed, with my guest being the CISO of our amazing show sponsor, Noname Security. And for those that are new to the channel, although I see some regular faces in the chat, quick shout out there to Jackson, Carey and Salunio. Thanks ever so much for tuning in. My name's Simon Linstead. I'm the founder of the InfoSec Live community and also your host for this show today. And sharing stories and best practice over the last few months has led to 27,000 views and 6,000 hours of our content being viewed on YouTube by our amazing subscribers. So a huge thank you for your engagement. And if you'd like to support the wider InfoSec Live community, or indeed buy me a non-alcoholic festive drink, we do have a few ways you can show your appreciation. Firstly, the ability to purchase super stickers in the chat if you'd like your question bumped up to the top, and 3 tiers of membership allowing you to show your support in any way that you can. And while I'm on that, a massive thank you to Arto Kane for being our latest premium member, and a very special shout out to Alana Boyajian for her very generous donation yesterday to the community. Thank you, Alana and Art. Your support really, really does mean a lot. But whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. And if you're watching this live, please do like and subscribe. We try to make these events as interactive as possible. So please make sure you drop any questions in the chat. And for my aging eyesight, please do mark them with a big Q so that I notice where they are, as it is you, our audience, who make these events so special. But I just want to take a moment to thank our amazing show sponsor for helping us grow and provide even more free and engaging content. For us, sponsorship is about partnering with the right organizations, and Noname Security is the only company out there taking a complete proactive approach to API security. Working with 20% Fortune 500 and covering the entire API security group across 3 pillars: posture management, runtime security, and API testing. They're backed by leading venture capital firms including Lightspeed, Georgian, the Syndicate Group, ForgePoint, Next47, Insight Partners, and CyberStarts, and have raised $220 million, achieving unicorn status only 1 year out of stealth. And I think we all realize that that really is some achievement. They're also privately held, remote first, with headquarters in Silicon Valley and offices in Tel Aviv and Amsterdam. And a link to find out more about how they can help your organization, get your words out, Simon, is in the comments. And if you're looking for work, after checking out their page this week, there are some career opportunities there as well. So do make sure you check that out. But as mentioned, today is a very special stream, as we have the CISO from Noname Security here to talk to us about his experiences and his journey in the industry. And Karl Mattson is a cybersecurity leader and innovator who serves as the CISO for Noname. 5 years experience leading innovative and diverse teams of technology and security professionals in financial services, retail, and federal government. Previously, Karl served as the Chief Information Security Officer for PennyMac Financial Services and City National Bank. He has a track record of providing CEOs, CTOs, and investors in cybersecurity on strategies for product, market, and customer success. And as well, Karl has served as an adjunct faculty for the University of Minnesota's MSST program since 2012. So without any more rambling from me, with a little festive jingle, let on. Oh, wrong one. One sec. Bit of Christmas cheer for you there, Karl.
Wow, that's like, it's like overwhelming. Your introduction is epic. I'm humbled. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. I do wonder whether it's all a bit overkill. Too much video at the start, too much going on. So it's something I'm going to review over Christmas. But it's definitely grown a lot over the last 6 months. So I appreciate your feedback. And look, we really appreciate yours and Noname support for effectively allowing us to continue with this series, because only a few weeks ago we were at the point where my contract had finished with the firm who were sponsoring the show up to that point. I was in a bit of limbo about not knowing what was going to happen moving forward. And you stepped in like a knight in shining armor, Karl, and really helped me and the community out. So firstly, I just want to say a massive thank you for that.
Oh, I'm honored to. I got to listen to several episodes of the podcast and on YouTube, and this is a great fit for us. It's a community, it's an active dialogue, and this is fantastic. Good, it's a great match.
Thank you, really appreciate it. So look, I've given a little bit of an overview about you in the comments, but what I normally do is ask the guests to sort of take a step back and talk about their journey into the industry. Are you okay to do that to start with?
Yeah, of course. Really, I've had like 3 different careers. The first decade of my career, I spent as an enlisted Army soldier. I got the lottery ticket of enlisting in the Army, which is I got assigned to NSA. So in my first decade, I was an intelligence analyst with the government and various military assignments. The second sort of decade, then I'm moving on to retail and consulting. Worked in a couple of organizations, Target in the U.S. The third decade is really for me to work in financial services. So I led a risk and compliance team at PNC Bank in Pittsburgh, City National Bank. I was the CISO in Los Angeles, PennyMac as a CISO. And so I kind of got to that 10-year mark in financial services, and I got the itch to do something new. So I
just wanted to get out, didn't you, Karl?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think for folks in financial services, it's a very complex and rewarding challenge. Like, there's no pressure cooker. I mean, the military is a little different, but there's no pressure cooker in corporate America like being in a cybersecurity team for a bank.
Yeah.
And that was very rewarding. It was exhausting at the same time. So I had my my eye on taking a departure and doing something different. And joining a startup is exhausting and rewarding in all different ways, even though like 90% of it's the exact same job. It's still
Yeah.
securing a network and an infrastructure and products, and you've got a team to manage and a budget, and almost everything like technically is the same. But it's just a very different like ebb and flow of priorities and pressures, and what constitutes a win and a victory may be different. Yeah, just a new chapter for me. It's about a year and a half in.
So from listening to what you've just said, then a couple of things I want to pick up on. One, I know we've got Jack Scott in the audience, who's ex Special Forces, came into cybersecurity a few years ago, and she's absolutely smashed it. And I know that she's managed to transfer a lot of the skills that she learned while serving into the industry. Do you feel that your time in the military has helped you with your career, Carl?
My career doesn't exist without my lucky break of getting assigned the career I did when I was about 19 years old. And so 100% yes. And I think that overwhelmingly the positive attributes that I have as a leader or as a practitioner all have their origin story in that sort of decade of my life serving, in public service. No, there's just a couple of those things that I had to learn how to dial back or dial down.
Yeah.
Things like handling conflict and interpersonal communications and managing small teams. It is a very different thing to be a squad leader as a non-commissioned officer in the Army as it
Yeah.
is to be a SOC manager. There's a lot of things that you have to fine tune about your approach, because you can't just bring a military approach in, one for one into a
No,
corporate environment. It's going to work on day one. But it's much easier to turn a couple of those things off than it is to have to go back and relearn them. Think of it like trying to like learn a language. It's a lot easier to learn a new language when you're 19 than it is when you're 50.
tell me about it.
It's like, so rewiring myself professionally at this point would be really hard. So
Yeah.
it's easier just to like uh, you know
Tinker.
details. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the other thing you mentioned in there was, whilst there's a lot of similarities between the role in financial services, being a CISO, and where you are now, would you say that you have more support, without wanting to slate off previous employers? I'm trying to put this in a generic way. Would you say there's more engagement from the board and perhaps more of a belief in the sales enablement position that you carry within the organization than there would have been in financial services?
Not really. So one of the experiences that I had, I was a CISO for a commercial bank, and as a commercial bank, your customers are often like large organizations, and I'll give you an example. The one that's easily found on search is some of our customers were things like professional sports teams.
Yeah.
And those are key customer relationships, or the customer might be something like a mortgage company. As the CISO for a bank, I was on the road, and I was part of the package of building and maintaining relationships with large commercial clients was their belief that our bank was secure. And so I was a part security was a part of the value proposition story.
Yeah.
And that's that made it a very like rewarding place to work, because like the board had my back, and so I've had the luxury of that experience, and to small doses of me pushing that agenda too, which is to try to make the security program a part of the business story. But that's achievable in financial services. It does work to put your security team out there as a part of why to do business with you, and I think that's
Yeah.
true in most verticals.
Yeah, I think maybe from my perspective, there, using financial services as a comparison for that was a poor one, with the regulation and the expectation
Mm.
from clients to
Yeah.
have that secure partner. The reason I mentioned it is a lot of the CISOs I speak to who don't work in regulated environments, they're not really involved much in the sales process at all, and it's a very, very different role to the one that you
Yep.
see perhaps yourself carrying out on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I have this story I've told a couple of times, and this is one of the things that I did as a CISO was to go on the road, and I did security awareness training sessions with some of our large customers. A couple of those customers were things like retirement homes or labor unions and commercial banks and commercial customers, those types of things. And that wasn't what's the word? I was putting myself out there because I kind of wanted the business partners to know that the security team was out there for the cause of customer relationship. And I think if most security practitioners look inside their organization and look real hard and push a little bit rather than pushing on the patch faster kind of things we push faster on the bring your security team to the table with your customers, because there's a story that we can tell, and you can build a credibility as a business enabler. And I think most businesses can have that, but you gotta push for it a little bit.
You have, yeah. And I suppose, again, talking about the skills you've had in the military, you can push for that. You just need to tailor with that pushing technique, perhaps, to how it used to be used in a more
Yep, yep,
physical
absolutely.
manner.
Yep.
Okay. There's a mix of people in the audience today. I want to try and encourage you to drop some questions in the chat, because it's always more interesting when we have the audience engaging. But we've got people ranging from those who've recently broken in to those who've broken in to other CISOs. In fact, I think we're in the audience. We've got the CISO who was on yesterday, Arnell. So a big hey to you. For those that are looking to break in, the industry is full of conflicting information. So from my point of view, having only been in the industry for less than 2 years, I came in blinded by wanting to become a penetration tester. There were two reasons for that. One, my love of tech and love of trying to break things. It seemed
Mhm.
like a good fit, but also the amount of propaganda and material there was out there that told me that I could do a couple of exams and become the world's best pen tester and earn 100 grand a year. So the point I'm getting to is all the leaders, bar none, who I've had on this show have all said that they would hire over potential rather than experience in some cases. There's certain things they look for with people. But when people come to apply for the jobs, the message that's coming down from the top, from the CISOs, it seems to be breaking down somewhere. So the question is, what can people do differently who are trying to break into the industry to get noticed?
Um, uh, I think the first thing is to take an expansive view of your career as a professional, and I think security professionals should look at themselves as something of a craftsman, so to speak, which is it's you want to assemble experiences and skills and demonstrations of those abilities or potentials in a variety of different ways. And so, a college degree, great. A certification, CEH, CISSP, great. Um, uh, a work experience of 1 or 2 years somewhere, great. All of those things add up. But I think that what security professionals, especially early career, leave on the table is that there are so many other sort of free things to do along the way. And like just to give you a couple examples, like the Open Web Application Security Project, OWASP.
Yeah.
There's chapters all over the world. Participation in OWASP projects is voluntary. And OWASP does some of the most interesting work in the field related to application security, whether it's frameworks, whether it's tools and utilities. There are enormous wins to put on the board as a professional, with not an extraordinary amount of time and effort, but that are really meaningful, that really add up to like a composite resume. That's overwhelming. Like indisputable, that a person who's actively participating. Um, uh, I'm gonna call somebody out who's here, like JJ Davy, who's I'll say hello to JJ, who he and I have never met, but I follow him on LinkedIn, and he's prolific in his coaching and training and advice to young professionals. So people like JJ are out there promoting practices that help people build careers. And also, there are people who are 22 years old who are on LinkedIn who are giving other people advice.
Yeah.
Being active in the community has is like a great skill set.
Yeah,
It's fantastic to see
absolutely.
that. Yep.
Yeah, and I want to just jump in while you mentioned JJ. JJ was actually one of the people who inspired me to try and do
Good.
better and make a difference in the community. So JJ, thanks for tuning in and thanks for everything you do. It is massively appreciated. And for anyone looking for resources on breaking in, check out Cyber Mentor Dojo, which is JJ's site, which is packed full of the opportunities to access mentors. And also, I think there's free training opportunities in there as well. Going back to the point on those trying to break in, Carey dropped a question in there, and his was about how to obtain the experience companies want if you haven't got the jobs. So his is, how do I obtain the experience companies want when I'm applying for IT jobs or cyber jobs that are entry level? Any suggestions for someone who's struggling to get that hands on?
Yeah, and this is an overgeneralization. So, pardon if this doesn't exactly apply to you, but I have found overwhelmingly the place where security professionals start their careers that really equip them to excel is like be a system administrator, be a Linux administrator, be a help desk administrator. It doesn't really matter what it is, but to have like a technical mastery of an area like Windows desktops, like that's an extremely valuable skill mastery to then bring into cybersecurity. So I would look at system administrator jobs outside of the security department. I look at those as like the security training ground step one, or think of it as phase zero of your career is
Yeah,
develop this competency that has invaluable utility as a security practitioner. And if you expand out your search net a little bit, not everybody needs to be a pen tester the first day or be a SOC analyst the first day, but you can gain almost the same degree of experience in developing like a security competency by going to be something like a DevOps engineer.
yeah,
A DevOps engineer literally is the security professional of the future. So
yeah.
I would recommend strongly to look at those other pathways to develop
I
meaningful.
completely agree, and
Yep.
I also want to mention managing expectations is super important. So I thought I could bypass knowledge of networks and stuff and get my OSCP passed. And whilst I
Yep.
managed to get one box in that exam, which was the worst 24 hours of my life by far, I had no underlying concept or understanding of what it is I was actually doing. And I think, what is entry level is the question. Is entry level no tech experience? In my humble opinion, it isn't, because without that, knowledge of Windows, knowledge of Linux, or whatever it might be, without that, how are you meant to secure anything if you don't understand what it is you're securing or what it is you're attacking? So, from my point of view, and without wanting to sound like a gatekeeper, because I failed miserably trying to come in doing my OSCP, I do think managing expectations is super important as well on both sides. And the noise from some boot camps out there about how easy it is really, really doesn't help. And I think taking time to listen to events like this, reaching out to other leaders, reaching out to people who do jobs that you want to do, they're all invaluable things that you can do. And just want to bring up this comment from JJ, and it's probably going to cut your head in half, Carl. So apologies if it does. But JJ, it has, yeah. A lot of advice seems to be given with the lack of consideration for real world variables, such as competitiveness, resource constraints of businesses, and business requirements. It's important for people entering the field to have a view of these things. And I completely agree with that. There's all this demand about why aren't companies taking people on and training them up? Well, if you've ever run a business or had involvement in running a business, there isn't a bucket of money that you can just keep drawing on. And sometimes there just isn't the funds to do this. What's your opinion on that?
Um, I'll give you my recent real world example of that. So I started as a CISO for Noname about 18 months ago, and sort of landing, early in the company before a lot of the team had been built out. As a CISO, I was also like the Okta admin. New employee arrives, someone's got to give them access to the basics, and as we build out like we've added new talented people to the team. We all have to wear different hats every day. The members of our team, their jobs are not the same today as they were 3 months ago.
Yeah.
There is reality. There's reality of things like, hey, do we want to start hosting our platform in Oracle or Alibaba clouds? Like those are now all of a sudden what it does is it dramatically accelerates the pace of change in an organization, because we have to secure entirely new variables. learn new skills. For us, like I feel like our environment and our the winds of supply and demand change quarterly. And so he's 100% right. I change my mind. I don't want the same things today that I wanted a
No.
quarter ago. Just the world changes. So
I think again, relating that to entering a career in cybersecurity, there's lots of noise about SOC analysts and pen testers, but there are like 50 other roles that you can look at. You know, GRC is a massively growing area, and as more small and medium businesses actually engage with security, it's probably the first port of call for a lot of them to start getting
yep.
bits and pieces done. But for me, you mentioned working for a startup and wearing lots of different hats, and I think it's worth focusing on that as well, because job adverts out there or job roles out there, one CISO role next to another role isn't going to be the same day-to-day job. I mean, I've worked for big blue chips, and I've also had my own small business in the past as well. And when you're working in a small team, you do get to do lots of different things because everyone has to muck in and help. And I would also say, depending on what your career choices and your plans are, making a decision on whether you want to go small firm or big firm could have a big influence on what happens to your career next.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest organizations in the world, ironically, have the smallest roles, because if you're a member of a 1,000-person department, your east and west boundaries are going to be fairly
Yeah.
constrained. That's fantastic for people who really value having like one deep specialty. Like I know this guy whose specialty is security around like compilers.
Yeah.
Okay, there's like 5 companies in the world that need like a compiler security specialist. So great, that's perfect for that person. And others of us, like myself, I see a shiny object and I want to move to something else and take something else on. And that makes a startup a rewarding place to be. So
Yeah, I mean, I think we're quite similar like that. Not that I get bored, but I like a challenge, and I think once I've done one thing, I like to move on to the next and keep things quite exciting. So for me, working for small businesses has always been more enjoyable. I've worked for Lloyd's Bank in the past, which is probably Anaviva or Norwich Union as they were then,
mhm,
and they were probably my least favourite positions, not because of the organisation. I haven't got anything against the companies, but it's back to that fact of being siloed with regards to what you do. You know, you go in every day, you do exactly the same job, and then you leave. I mean, for some people, that's brilliant. That's heaven. That's what they want to do. For me, give me a week of that, and I'm pulling what little hair I've got out left.
well, that's not, and it's not necessarily that it it may sound like my opinion there's a little judgmental, but like here's the alternative. If the alternative is if the core purpose of your life is to go surfing, and you need a job to subsidize your surfing habit, go for it. Like wonderful.
Yeah,
Or if the at the end of the day, the only thing you really care about is your kids, and as long as you can make enough money to pay the rent and from 9 to 5, and you choose a job that has, I don't know, not variety to it, that's not a bad thing. Corporations are they're safer, right? They're a safer
yeah,
place to be, particularly if you've got um, sometimes work-life balance, sometimes, whether it's, hey, maybe I can work remote from home and I can
yeah,
do this job. Maybe it's kind of simple, but I can do all those other things in life that I want to do. The alternative is like, I have kids, but I don't have a hobby.
yeah.
I've never had a hobby. I
I've
don't
got
know what
I've
it
got
would be
six
like.
children. They are my hobby. Yeah,
Well, yeah. So, I mean, everybody's going to value their different things. I think it is important for people to be honest with themselves about what they value,
I think I
and
think
not
that
and not run from that. That's okay.
I completely agree, and I think one of the things that people miss out a lot on any career transition or journey is to look at actually what their idea of success is.
Mhm.
And I say that from experience of chasing money and being extremely miserable when I had a lot of money for various reasons. And my idea of success now is that success is a mindset, not a destination. And I'm not constantly chasing that next thing. And that has changed my life exponentially. But I want to, I'll probably annihilate this parable, but someone told me this, and it relates to what you've just said about, I think it was, I'm not going to call them American tourists. Let's say some British tourists on holiday, I think in Indonesia. And the man and his wife are sitting in this beautiful restaurant by the harbour, and they're eating this fish, and it's the best fish that they've ever had. And one day the chap who brings the fish in walks past the table, and the guy stops him and he says, look, he said, this is the best fish I've ever eaten. He said, have you ever thought of expanding your business? Have you ever thought about getting some more boats? And the bloke said, no. Why would I do that? He said, well, if you got more boats, he said, you could treble your revenue. He said, you could then look at perhaps becoming not just a fisherman, but a distribution partner as well to lots of businesses out there. He said, well, what would that mean? He said, well, after a few years, you'd probably be able to float. He said, oh, great. Okay. And what would that do? He said, well, then you'd have all this money and you could do what you want. He said, you could, spend all day with your family and the rest of the time sitting on the beach and thing. And I think that story really struck home for me, because we're all chasing this thing. From school, we're looking forward to leaving primary school and going to high school. We're then looking forward to passing our driving test and getting our first car. We're then looking forward to college or the next job, the next thing. And it's not a way to live your life, Carl. I mean, we've gone off the security subject a little bit here, but the whole point is you've got to work out and find out what success is to you and what you want to be doing in your job every day before you start nailing your colors to a career mast, perhaps.
Well, the other thing too is I think we all have a bit of a fear of the unknown too, about what it's going to take to you know if we leave somewhere that's comfortable, if we do something uncomfortable with our career and take a risk, like is it gonna pan out? Like I took my wife and I had twins just about 4 years ago. They're just about 4 years old, and I took a year off. Which at that time, my wife is a doctor, so she couldn't do the stay at home mom thing, so that was me. So I
Sure.
did that for 5 year. And what happened during that year is that ironically my career took off. Because all of a sudden, because I departed this CISO role and I was home, and I had a couple hours a day, like during like baby nap time and things. But what I was able to do is I was able to take calls, do coaching, advisory stuff. I was just taking a little bit of work, kind of like to stay busy because I could really use some adult interaction. But what it did is
Yeah.
it freed me from the constraint of engaging with people transactionally like it was my job. I just got to do it because I enjoyed it. And that created a whole range of relationships, one of which is the company that I have right now, Noname. That's my
Yeah.
employer. I met Noname while I was while I was an unemployed stay-at-home dad, along with a couple other companies, I just did some kind of like free couple hour sessions where we just talked about like the market. We talked about problems with solutions and vendors and things like that. And that just created a lot of space for good relationships. And so each time I've taken a step back and maybe taken a little bit of a risk, it's actually been really rewarding for me. So, and I
Well, that,
didn't know coming out of it what was going to happen, but it really did shape, positive for me.
I mean, for me, I've spent my whole life taking risks, and if I'm honest, the last few years I've tried to avoid being quite as risk takery as I used to be. However, going back to your comment about 4-year-old twins, I've got 4-year-old twins, so
Mhm.
I take my hat off to you for looking after them for a year, because if they're anything like mine, it's not easy. As rewarding as it is, they're quite
Yep.
demanding. We've got non-identical boy and a girl, but it's like they're
Oh,
flipped. The girl
us
is the
too.
one climbing trees and kicking footballs, and
Ah,
my little boy is the one cuddling his dad on the sofa. It's lovely.
that's funny. Yeah, they turned 4 in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
So
no,
we're
ours were 4 in March. Better get that right. When you got 6, you have to write the numbers down. But yeah,
yep,
March they were
yep,
4. But anyway, away from the kids, we've got a question
yep.
question in the chat from Richard as well. For a new or wannabe CISO in relation to a new or young company, where, in your opinion, are the primary areas to start with securing the business and its products? That's a good question. And I think
Primary
before
to
you dig
start.
into that, there's an awful lot. I mean, we talk about a skills gap, or we don't. The industry talks about this skills gap, which is kind of mainly focused at the entry level end. My opinion is that the skills gap really is at the end you're at, Carl. And I think there's not enough leaders with the management and the team leading experience and the technical experience to do the roles. So these questions that Richard has asked are coming up more and more from people who've been in the industry for a long time but want to take that next step.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a new CISO, new company. I mean, the first thing may sound kind of obvious, but it's extremely important that you understand right from the get go exactly how that company makes money, um,
Yeah.
mechanically, like literally from the inbound website or business development or sales call through POC processes, and then mechanically like structure how the contract's structured, all the way through um, like the customer relationship. So is it an implementation? Are you providing implementation services? Are you working with channel partners? Are you if you could draw a picture of how the company makes money? I know that sounds like I'm kind of reducing that to its essentials, but I think
Yeah.
the important thing to know is uh, as a CISO, you should feel like you have a native, organic, intuitive understanding of the entirety of the business and how it lives and how it survives. Because the first thing you'll find is if you first thing you do is a vuln scan and a pen test, what you're going to find is you're going to find like okay, I have a my network or my something lit up like a Christmas tree. Okay, well, guess what? So did every other company in the world. Where do I start? How do I responsibly care and feed for this environment in light of what customers need, what our priorities are? Whose work am I disrupting if I demand a patch on a Saturday night? Okay, well, I know that
Yeah.
there's certain teams that I can have them do something on a Saturday because it's a log4j emergency, and then there's other things that can wait until Monday morning for normal business. So I do think that it would be necessary to pick people in the organization from sales, customer success, or lines of business, finance and legal. And the first thing to do is job shadow them and pick their brain for exactly
Yeah.
how the company works. Because otherwise, what you're going to end up, you're going to misfire on what to prioritize and when, and you'll expend your credibility before unnecessarily.
And it also stops any blockers in the boardroom later. If you've spent time developing relationships with all of these people in
Yep.
the organization, you understand what drives them, you understand what their key priorities are for their role. When it comes to you then putting something across to them or trying to get something over the line, it makes the
Yep.
job a lot easier, surely. And as JJ said in the chat, context is key before you look at installing any security controls. And I think that's exactly what you've just been saying.
Yeah, when you have context for the company and truly how it operates, you can make very good priority choices quickly. Like to some degree, I work for a company of like 300 people. So if somebody in the security team comes to me and says, "Hey, Carl, I think we need tool X." To do something, I think we have a gap here. Let's go look at this. To be honest with you, I think it takes us collectively about 30 seconds to like, all right, let's think this through. Like, what do we need? What are the priorities? Is this in the top 10 of things we should do? Is this number two? Is this down at the bottom? Because a relatively small company, the security team should develop a pretty early mastery of the context there. And
Yeah.
if possible, this isn't true in every vertical, but if you can ever be a customer of your company, you should always opt to do that as fast as possible. Whatever the product
What,
is, whatever
to
the
see what
service
the
is,
experience is like.
be your own customer in any
Yeah.
respect that's even plausible. That's important.
Thank you, Carl. While we're on that, then, a question or a topic that comes up a lot is with you being a vendor in the marketplace. It's a relevant question to ask you guys because a lot of the CISOs we speak to get sick and tired of all the inbox hell that they get messages from different providers and vendors. What is the way to approach and advise CISOs on products?
Um, well, I'm one of those CISOs too. I get annoyed, right? I get annoyed by calls and emails, and there's things. But the first things first, which is um, companies who sell products and services are not using channels of communication that haven't proven themselves to work. Companies are not wasting money. They're not throwing money down the drain by throwing a CISO dinner or calling people from a call list, whatever the case is. So first things first is some CISOs like that. There are a lot of CISOs who buy. Not every CISO has the same buying pattern. So
Yeah.
I think the consideration for the company, for the seller is I want to put myself in front of buyers, but I have to understand that buyers across the world and in different geographies have very different sensibilities about how they want to buy, and so I have to be diverse in the ways that I offer my company. So, like
Yeah.
for me personally, I really don't talk about Noname as a platform a whole lot. I talk about like security, and I talk at industry events and things like that, but I don't really get into the mechanics of like an implementation, and that's not really what I do, because I talk to CISOs about things that are pain points. And then there's other people on the team that are the technical engineers that talk about the platform, the solution, in a more of a traditional sales context. So the seller has to reach out to the buyers and be where they are. And CISOs, I think, just need to take a deep breath sometimes. If they get a, if
It's not a personal attack, is it?
not,
A
not
sales
personal.
message?
Um,
No.
like for example, if I'll get 5 LinkedIn messages today from unsolicited LinkedIn in mail. Like, yep, I'm not interested. I just delete, 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 delete. It's not
Yeah.
personal, but there's no harm in just let it go. It's
Yeah.
okay. No one's trying to hurt you, or somebody's flooding your inbox. You know what? If you got
Just
Gmail,
stop.
mark it
Yeah.
spam. It's not complicated. You don't have to go on LinkedIn to embarrass somebody
No,
because
you
they
don't. You don't.
reached it. So
I completely agree, and I'm horrified every time I see that, because I think people are just trying to do their jobs. And my perspective on it is, a lot of the experienced CISOs in the market have got existing relationships with industry peers who they can go to, reach out to, ask questions if they need advice on something. But we've got a massive amount of new CISOs entering the
mhm.
marketplace at the moment. And my argument would be, how are they going to find out about the products unless someone's reaching out to them? Because they haven't got the time on a day-to-day basis to start researching products. I mean, there's what, 4,000 products in the market at the moment?
Yeah, yeah. That's uh, no one knows, but that would be the low end of the guess, right?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I think the CISO networks that I'm a part of, I think I have like I've got about a dozen Slack channel CISO networks that are kind of various focus areas. I have a CISO group for vendors. I've got a CISO group for West Coast. I've got a CISO group for advisory board CISOs, those kind of things. And yeah, so you just develop the relationships of people you trust, and to some degree, I'd say that I get marketed to as much as any CISO, and it's just okay.
it is what it
My
is.
feelings aren't hurt. It's okay. Um, the other part too is there's always a professional way to say no.
Yeah,
When salespeople reach out to me on LinkedIn, I don't necessarily reply, but I usually accept connections by people who appear to be
yeah.
real people from real companies, because you never know. Maybe that person is somebody who might be a really good salesperson and might be ideal to join your company. There's no reason to make enemies in this business. So.
No, I completely agree. And what I've picked up on from what you've just said is, you educate and build trust
Mhm.
with your clients.
Yep.
And I think, once they've got their foot in the door, it's that not having the expectation of getting a quick sale within 2 months, because how do you know who you're approaching has that issue at the moment? But if you spend time developing the relationship and building trust with that CISO, I can bet my bottom dollar that when they come up with a problem that relates to that service in the future, if you've got that
Yep.
relationship with them, you're going to be the one who gets called.
Yeah, the one thing I'd probably adjust about that though is it's very rare that the CISO is the customer. The CISO
Yeah,
usually will ultimately approve the selection of a technology, but we don't market to CISOs. I have relationships with CISOs, but our CISOs are rarely involved in a purchase decision. Usually, it's like a manager director level. Generally speaking, we look at our customers, not a CISO. The CISO may be the boss of our customer, and that's fair. But we call it, might call that the economic buyer. But the technical buyer of our platform is usually a technical security lead of application security, security operations, whichever. And so I think that there's probably too much emphasis on marketing to CISOs, because I don't think that we're unusual. I don't think CISOs usually are buyers unless you're in a 5-person shop. So I mean, the largest companies in the world, CISOs, we're not marketing to that person. We're marketing to the directors of programs that secure systems and applications.
yeah, absolutely. Sorry, my connection just dropped out
Mhm.
there, so I think we've swapped places on the screen
Okay.
while I dove out and dove back in. So massive apologies for that. Your picture, my end is frozen, but I'm hoping that on YouTube it is still visible. But if you just give me 2 seconds, I'm just going to refresh my page, and I'll
Yep.
be right back. 1 second. Sorry about this, everyone.
Well, while he's gone, what shall we talk about? Oh, he's
Here
back.
we
Okay.
go. I'm back. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? I think either it's my 4-year-old twins who have just decided to put their iPads on or play a game on the internet. So whichever it was, massive apologies for dropping out there, everyone. I'm just going to turn the chat off because all the chat has disappeared, and we'll carry on. Going back to there was a question from Richard that I've now lost that was in the chat. Richard, if you can drop that back in, I'm happy to pick it up again. But at the moment, I've lost all access to the chat stream. So let's talk about Noname Security. Let's talk about what it is you guys do there and how the journey's gone. Because to get to 220 million a year after stealth is a huge achievement. What have you guys done differently?
Um, well, it's also good to be lucky. It's good to be good, and it's good to be lucky. So I think there's a couple of things that have really worked in our favor to date, and I think that the trends continue. The first is IT organizations everywhere in the world are looking at sort of API based products and services as the cheat code to deliver tech faster.
Yeah,
So like the perfect example is like the banking, your mobile banking app. Now you can check your credit. It can you got rewards points. You can look up how much is going to cost to insure my house or my car. All of those data points in your mobile banking app, they're all API calls out to a third party.
yeah,
And the more the more pressure there is on IT to deliver products and services faster, that makes really every industry vertical more and more API centric, because APIs and using third party services are the cheat code. That's how to deliver faster.
yeah,
So the ocean is rising in terms of APIs in their utilization. Therefore, it's also rising in terms of how much do I care as a security team about securing those APIs? Well, when I had 5, it was one thing, but now I've got 10,000. I have to care about this problem set a lot more. And then I think what we did differently from the start is design a platform that sort of fundamentally adapts to the contours of a customer's environment. We're not like we're not a multi-tenant SaaS cloud in the sky that you plug in. Like, we have 1,000 customers plugging into our multi-tenant SaaS cloud, which is us asking a customer to use our architecture as we defined it.
yeah,
Instead, what we sort of take the outside-in approach is Noname is a software company, and our software can be deployed in a dizzying number of configurations that all. So if you've got a data center in Tennessee that's like off the network and you want to put Noname in the data center, absolutely. If you're an AWS shop in the UK, absolutely. It doesn't really matter what your architecture is. We can deploy the software in such a way that adapts to you. And so I think that adaptability has really changed our position from being an early entrant now to being at employee count, or however you want to measure it, the leader in the clubhouse in terms of where this category is going.
Do you think the malleability of the product is key then? Because as you just said, a lot of the others that are kind of plug and play, cloud based, all do the same
Mhm.
thing. You utilize what options that suit you, but having something that is locally based, am I right in saying that? It's a
Yeah. So it optionally, yes.
okay.
So absolutely. So what that allows us to do, for example, let's say it's a large global enterprise that uses Azure, GCP, AWS, and they've got 25 data centers. That enterprise, we can deploy multiple variations of our software at that one customer to give them a sort of a single pane of glass view across their whole API estate, agnostic to where those APIs are. And that kind of global flexibility is really key, because yes, it's nice to have something that plugs and plays from AWS Marketplace and great. And there's advantages to that. But when you start getting really complex and you start talking about like global enterprise traffic flows,
Yeah,
we're talking about petabytes an hour of traffic. Okay, now you're talking about like an industrial grade solution. And those kinds of organizations, it's irrational to try to offload traffic or offload telemetry to a multi-tenant SaaS. You have
Yeah.
to process locally when you're dealing with really like core backbone companies. It's impossible to conceive of that much traffic being shipped across the world to a multi-tenant SaaS for analysis and then back again.
Okay, thank you. And for anyone watching who wants to find out more, who's the point of contact at Noname for people to reach out to? Is there a link I can drop in the chat, or is it just the general Noname website link?
Sure. Yeah, actually, and I'll highlight one thing for everybody joining today. So, nonamesecurity.com slash workshop. And so our workshop it's 3.5 hours. It's a CPE class. So if you have certifications you want to maintain, and what the workshop is basically, it's a live fire environment where people in the workshop get to practice. You get to practice attacking and defending APIs in such a way that for the majority of security professionals, defending APIs is kind of a new thing. And so this whole workshop is like a practice range. You get to learn about the fundamentals of APIs. Yes, we use our platform as the defender side, and so to some degree, what we're illustrating how it works to be an API security defender, and that's something that is it's registered with ISC squared for CISSP hours, those kinds of things.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
really valuable way to see, and you get it automatically. Like you get your CISSP hours automatically by registering for the class. So that's a really interesting way, I think, to accelerate like an understanding of, in particular, because the whole time a student is in this workshop, I say student, it could be anybody. Anybody in the workshop is going to be immediately thinking about, like, I wonder what this looks like at my organization. Like, I wonder if I have the capability to do this. If this happened at my organization, would I catch it? Good. And you'll have our contact. But otherwise, it's just a great way to kind of raise the education level about what it means to secure APIs.
I love that. And again, it's back to educating people, isn't it? I mean, for me, with 30 years sales experience, I think education is the only way to successful customer relationships. If you're actually, you care about what it is they're looking to achieve, rather than just trying to sell them a product, which is clearly where you guys and girls at No Name are. And for anyone interested, I have just dropped excuse me, the link for the workshop in the chat, so please do jump in there and grab that link. Thank you, Richard, for dropping the questions back in as well. So I'll just bring Richard's question up here. What do you see being the challenges of 2023 onwards, and have they changed from this past year or two? Good question, because obviously Gartner reports and everything else are all coming out left, right, and center, and there does seem to be a lot of repetition from not just the last 1 or 2 years, but perhaps the last 10, Carl.
Yeah, I mean, I can't foresee a year forward where we're going to be different than the last 20 years. And to use like Richard Steinman's phrase, threats are up, spending's up, blah blah blah. The only variable of 2023 that could be interesting is if the macro economy does have a really sharp turn downwards. What pressures does that place on the security team, essentially, to do more with less? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's really the only variable that's not sort of the same every year, and that variable is real, right? How does the security team with a 10, 20, 30% reduction in budget or staff secure the same footprint? And so I think the pursuit of efficiency, it carries a risk for any organization to cut corners. And that security teams are in the crosshairs because we're not usually revenue generating, and that's the challenge of 2023, if you ask me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, my concern for next year, maybe being geographically located in the UK and near Europe, is the potential impact of an escalation of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And
Yep.
you talk about budgets. I mean, you look at critical infrastructure, not just in the UK, but around the world. A lot of outdated or old tech. Typically, not as much talent within that pool as there is the rest of cybersecurity. And for me, that's a huge concern over the next couple of years. And again, being in the UK, being on an island where we've got cables running under the North Sea to you guys that are very, very vulnerable. We've got near me actually a place called Bacton is the biggest gas terminal or gas point coming in to the UK. Again, that's extremely vulnerable from an
Mhm.
attack point of view. And that's what's scaring the life out of me at the moment. But I think again, the media don't help that with everything that we get pushed in our faces every day. But having a friend called Yuri who's in Ukraine and only a few miles away from the Belarusian border, it's a huge concern for them over there. They're in -3 temperatures, no food, no light. So it's my heart goes out to all of you over there dealing with that at the moment.
Well, yeah, and that was the unknown of 2022 that term,
Yeah,
that we could have never. I mean, there are people I'm sure that did predict something like this, but I mean, I think that as a security organization, we were not planning for that.
no.
And to some degree, it's still impossible to see how that manifests itself of resolving or devolving in the next year.
I mean, again, we've the media has braced us for this kind of masses of attacks, which I know there are lots of attacks going on everywhere at the moment from malicious actors, but there hasn't been the volume that we were expecting. My concern is that, without getting into politics too much, is that they are very capable when it comes to cyber offensives, and it's as though they're holding it back for something special. And that's my concern, that we've got a bit of pain coming next year if things don't go right for them. I mean, that they're struggling with it at the moment. It's kind of not progressed how they wanted to, and it's a bit of a concern. But moving away from politics, because I've always said not to talk about politics, children, or animals when I'm doing this show, I'm going to come back to Gareth Stacey's question. Good to see you, Gareth. And this is: do you think business leaders will take more accountability for cybersecurity risk in the coming years? I don't know if this is off the back of the poor feckless CISO who's just been sent to jail. Was it Uber? I can't remember which company it was now.
Yep. Joe
Yeah,
Sullivan from Uber. Yep.
that's it. Yeah. So do you think business leaders will take more accountability? And when you say business leaders, are you talking about, Gareth, are you talking about the C-suite here, the directors, or are you talking about, the ones who should take the responsibility, or are you talking about the CISOs who are perhaps scapegoats? I shouldn't have said that out loud.
Well, while Gareth thinks about that, I think the answer is unequivocally yes. In the U.S. in particular, the SEC for publicly traded companies is mandating cybersecurity executive experience on boards of directors. They're requiring dramatically more transparency into events or incidents, as well as reporting on risk to their shareholders. So I think that so there's definitely not going to be a decline in business accountability and ownership. In fact, it's the opposite. Like U.S. companies, at least, and I think to some degree, um, on this particular subject of like SEC filings, though, like the U.S. is going to have influence in the world as well, which
Yeah.
is companies are going to assign a much greater level of executive responsibility. The only thing that I would caution a little bit on the Uber case is that the Uber case has a lot of outlines and I wish I could find the link to send this to you. The Uber case is unusual. Uber is an unusual company.
Yeah.
The Uber Joe Sullivan was an unusual person. He was at a career as a federal prosecutor. He was an attorney. There's a lot of things about that case that I think are outliers. So my personal recommendation would be like I look at that Uber case and I eat popcorn while I read through it because I think it's kind of interesting, but I don't think that it applies to the vast majority of us. At
No.
least like that company's dynamics are so much different than most of us deal with. I don't think that I don't think that most CISOs in most organizations are personally at like liability risk in
No.
in the kind of way that we saw play out with Uber.
No.
So
I
I just
agree.
think I think that there's there's a reason that case is in the news is it's fascinating from a lot of areas, but I read that and I think, well, there's nothing about that looks remotely like anything I've ever encountered in my career.
No, I
Um,
mean, it's my comment on that has been, without seeing the full court transcript, I
yep.
don't want to make a comment. And now you've elaborated more on the guy's background. It certainly is a unique case because he would have felt perhaps in a position to make decisions that perhaps he shouldn't have done. I mean, again, I'm talking out of turn without seeing the court transcript, but it is a very different organization, and hopefully not a regular occurrence that we're going to see happening over the next year or
Yeah.
two, because the last thing we need is potential leaders to be scared away by
Mhm.
the potential of litigation.
Yeah. I think that's I think it's an edge case. That's my opinion.
Yeah, good. And last comment then, because we're pretty much out of time, but we've got JJ who's watched the whole show. I really appreciate that, JJ. Thank you. Said, think board of directors need to have well-established governance overall due diligence to ensure that executives are effective. But we are seeing a large uptick in ESG legal requirements.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, board level governance is going to really shift in the next couple of years towards um, executive and shared accountability, and that's a good thing. Um, uh, w- uh, Security teams might not like on paper the fact that now we've got all these risk, compliance, audit, legal people involved, but it's healthy. Um,
Yeah,
I think that there are at least echoes. There's differences, but there's echoes of Sarbanes-Oxley here in cybersecurity, which is after the Enrons of the world in the
yeah,
2003 timeframe. Sarbanes-Oxley regulation really crystallized exactly what financial reporting responsibilities up to the CFO. The way that Sarbanes-Oxley has changed finance, it looks like we're heading that way towards cybersecurity too.
yeah. And I think sooner the better. From my point of view, I think it's definitely going to improve the landscape. Okay, so any last comments or words of advice or wisdom or inspiration for our audience, Carl, before we wrap things up?
Yeah, one thing, there's predictions for 2023. One thing I would encourage everybody in security in particular to look back at 2020, 2021, and look at what tremendous upheaval, business, personal, otherwise, that we all went through in COVID. And we did pretty well. Like, we weathered a really tough period of time. For a lot of people, that was a difficult time frame. So, like, when you look into 2023, like, no matter what the prediction is, whether it's related to the Ukraine war or the macro economy, we just got through a really tough stretch. And as an industry, I think we did well. We
Yeah.
did not fold under an enormous amount of pressure. So I think that whatever 2023 holds for us, we've done this before. We've gotten through it. We survived, and we performed as a profession admirably, and our companies came out of it, and most everybody survived what was a really tough stretch. So I think we're ready for anything as an industry.
I love that. And I love the positivity to end on there. And I just want to finish off by firstly thanking you for your time today, Carl, and also thanking you and Noname for the support, obviously, of the CISO Experience show. And a massive thank you to everyone who's jumped in the chat and engaged with questions today. It really does make all the difference. And I hope you all learned as much as I have from Carl on this session today. We are back tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. We've got 3 more episodes this week. I'll drop a link on LinkedIn a bit later with a bit more information about tomorrow's, because I haven't got it to hand and I can't actually remember who I've got on, so I don't want to make a mistake. It's been a busy week so far. I'm looking forward to finishing it off over the next few days with some more insightful conversations. So again, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't, please like and subscribe, and do make sure you check out nonamesecurity.com/ what was it, Carl? Workshop. Amazing. Carl, thank you so much. Audience, thank you for tuning in.
Thanks, Simon. Have a great